Hi.
We're back.
Yes.
How was did you figure out Facebook or did you
I did. I think I did. I did.
Yay.
Yes.
So Facebook always makes it harder and it also changes the interface every couple months. So as soon as you think you know how to do something, then like 6 months later, you're like, oh, these careful instructions that I wrote for myself.
I know.
Not so much.
So participants, that's what I want. Yeah. So basically with Facebook, it was saying like log into your account. And then once you logged into your account, there was a drop down that said now attached to a
Right.
page instead of your account. And then I could select the page that I wanted to post it to.
So there you go.
Yes.
An unnecessary step, arguably.
Yes. Oh, so you moved?
Yeah, I just moved to I shifted where I was in the conference room and
Okay.
pulled down the blind. Was worried about the lighting. I mean, not that anyone's gonna like rank me on the
I know
windows.
I've got some weird lighting coming in through right now too, where it's like, now you have a halo.
Right. But here we are.
I'm just like eating something really
I
quick.
know.
I haven't had any breakfast yet, and I was like, oh, that would be terrible if I was like starving for an hour.
Well, this is one of the downsides of the virtual thing is it's like it's so easy to not take time to eat because you're like
I know.
not going, whereas you
Mm-hmm.
were like I
If
have
you
to,
were, yeah,
or having coworkers around. I mean, which is one of the nice things about being in the office. There's not that many of us. Most people are still at home, but like when on the days that you do come in and there's someone else there, then you're like, let's go get coffee. Like,
I
oh,
know.
this is
Or have a lunch break in the break room.
yes.
Yeah, not happening really at home. I know it'll be like 4 o'clock. I had lunch yesterday when I was like
Uh,
a very odd time. And then I wasn't hungry for dinner.
all right. It looks like you need to enable screen sharing.
Oh yeah, I'm going to make you co-host right now.
Perfect. That will work.
And then
Here we go.
I can start admitting people.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. We're just going to wait a few minutes to allow people some more time to log in, and then we'll get started around 5 after. We're just giving a few more minutes to give people a chance to log on, and then we'll get started. We've had a couple more people log on, so we're just waiting a couple more minutes. Okay, so I think we can get started. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Sierra Nevada Alliance's September webinar. My name is Jennifer Marshall, and I am the Alliance's Development and Community Engagement Director. And I'm so happy that all of you could make it here this afternoon. So today we're honored to have Len Montgomery with Environment America for a discussion on forests and climate change, how our public lands can help us tackle the climate crisis. And Len runs campaigns to protect America's beautiful places, from local beachfronts to remote mountain peaks. And prior to her role, Len worked as the organizing director for Environment America's Climate Defenders campaign. Ellen lives in Denver, where she likes to hike in the Colorado mountains. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and add them to the chat and I'll keep track of them, and then we can ask them at the end during our question and answer section. And so I will now turn it over to Len to get her presentation started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here and talking to you all about one of my absolute favorite campaigns. So Len Montgomery, as Jennifer said, and I'm the Public Lands Campaign Director with Environment America, and also serve on the coordinating group of the Climate Forest Campaign, which is a national coalition of over 100 organizations working to protect our forests. And before I dive in, just a little bit about my background. I am a campaigner and an organizer, so I'm not a climate scientist or a conservation biologist. I work pretty closely with a number of folks like that, and so I'm happy to I'm happy to field any and all questions that you all have. But mostly my role is about working to build public support for and and coordinate this this campaign that I'm going to talk about. But again, happy to field science questions. I may just have to phone a friend and get back to you at a later time. But let me dive in and talk a little bit about our campaign and our work to protect forests. So I want to start by talking a little bit about what it is that we are working to protect. I'll explain why, give you a little bit of an update on the current status of protection, the political situation, and then what our groups are working on. So we are working to protect the oldest trees and forests in the United States. And you've probably heard of an old growth forest, but what does that really mean? So there are a handful of things that we want to look for when you're, and that scientists look at when they're trying to figure out, working to figure out if a forest is old growth. So things to look for: has the forest developed naturally while recovering from natural disturbances? So, whether that's fires, droughts, insects, has the forest grown back and developed naturally? Does it have a diversity of tree species, sizes, and ages? Are there standing and down dead trees? So when trees die, they'll stay standing for sometimes decades longer, they'll fall, they'll become part of the forest ecosystem. A diversity of understory plants and healthy soil. So the understory is the bottom layer. Those are the short the short plants, the felled trees, all of the foliage and life that's growing sort of down at the bottom. And does it provide a habitat for a diversity of insects, birds, and other wildlife? So if you were to park yourself in a old growth forest and sit for hours or days, would you see lots of different insects and critters and other folks moving around? So those are some things to look for when you're looking to see what an old growth forest is. Old growth is really wild and messy. Natural forests are dynamic. Disturbances are always changing things. And so healthy old growth forests are not just big trees, but also all of the processes and structures that help support pieces of a fully fledged ecosystem. And it takes over 100 years to achieve this in most ecosystems. There aren't very many forests or areas that are over 100 years old. So our effort is actually focused not on just protecting what remains of old growth, but recovering old growth that was lost. So we are calling for protections of forests and stands. So a stand is a group of trees that are around 80 years old and older, so that those can grow into old growth. So, you know, if we if we don't protect trees that are 80 years old, in 10 years they won't be 90, and then in 20 years they won't be 100, and so on. So we're really focused on protecting future old growth as well as existing old growth. Sometimes you hear that forests are being replanted, but unfortunately, replanting often results in what we call a plantation, not a functional ecosystem. So if you're in an area that has a bunch of trees, but they're all the same species, the same age, all about the same size, that's not a fully functional ecosystem. That's a plantation. That's not a forest. It's not a mature forest. And it's not an old growth forest. So as I just said, you know, the old growth forests, and these are, again, forests that have been more or less untouched by industrial logging and development for centuries, are critical habitats for thousands of species. The longer that they grow, the more time a fully fledged and interconnected ecosystem has to develop. In addition, older trees also absorb and store more carbon dioxide than younger trees, helping us to fight climate change. To cut down these trees will release the carbon while simultaneously reducing our ability to store carbon. So you're both releasing the carbon by cutting them down, and then you're cutting down these carbon storehouses that, and this is a catastrophic cycle that exacerbates our climate crisis and global warming. As trees grow wider and taller, their bark thickens, also giving them a natural resistance to wildfires and fortifying the overall resilience of the forest. So when we're cutting down these older, larger trees, we're releasing carbon, we're limiting our ability to store carbon in the forest, or rather for the forest themselves to store carbon. And we're removing the trees that are most resilient to wildfire and other disturbances. And then along with the ecological benefits and the climate change benefits, our forests also provide countless opportunities for recreation. And Americans love our forests. We hike, we climb, we fish, we hunt, and 18 million people visited and used national forests in 2020. That number continues to go up, and the demand for outdoor recreation opportunities across the American public just continues to grow. And then beyond recreation, our forests are also key for public health. 66 million people rely on national forests as their water source. So again, we've got wildlife habitat and other ecosystem benefits. We've got carbon absorbing and storage. We have recreational opportunities, and we have filtering clean water and filtering drinking water. These forests are incredibly important. We need to protect the ones that exist already, the old growth, and we need to restore what's left. So I want to give a little bit of background on efforts that have happened in the past to protect large chunks of our federal forest land, and want to start with a little bit of history on the roadless rule. So in January 2001, more than 20 years ago, federal protections that designated nearly 60 million acres of our national forests as roadless areas went into effect. And by being designated as roadless, those spaces are off limits for road building and commercial logging, which allows ecosystems and the wildlife to thrive. This was the last big political development, the last big protection that happened more than 20 years ago. And it was the work of probably a decade or so of work from organizers, volunteers, environmental groups. And in the end, those organizers and activists collected and delivered 1.6 million public comments to the Forest Service. That's actually where I got my start. So the photo there is one of the props that we had was this huge inflatable Smokey the Bear that we toured all around the country to help raise awareness about building support for the roadless rule. And that's me as a college student about 22 years ago, hugging Smokey after having struggled with the generator to get him blown up. So I've got a short video that hopefully we'll be able to get all the sound and everything else to work. And this is just some highlights from that effort, 20 years about the roadless rule.
20 years ago, organizers and activists collected and delivered 1.6 million public comments in support of a bold idea
to protect the remaining roadless areas in our national forests.
Roadless areas provide critical habitat.
Roadless areas provide clean drinking water.
And roadless areas help us fight climate change.
And roadless areas are places we can hike, ski, and climb.
We knew the American public supported protecting these areas, but we had to demonstrate that. So we got to work
to collect 1.6 million public comments. We knocked on doors. We set up tables on college campuses. We waved people down on public sidewalks.
We had this huge inflatable Smokey the Bear that came with its own generator and a very long extension cord that we set up on college campuses all across the country. So you'd plug it in and people would stand around you and stare as it slowly inflated and Smokey started to stand up next to you.
In 2000, I wore this shirt all summer, knocked on doors in Denver, Colorado, and in Boulder, Colorado to build support.
I even at one point followed Al Gore around New Hampshire with a 15-foot tall inflatable Smokey Bear, urging him to take a leadership role in protecting our wild national forests.
Of all of the rulemakings that the agency engaged in, of the 1.6 million comments that we got as we were working through the roadless issue, is probably an all-time high for the Forest Service.
It showed me the power of what can happen when everyday people get involved.
In 2001, the roadless area conservation rule was enacted.
I listened as President Clinton made the announcement in the National Arboretum and the snow fell gently on the evergreen trees around him. We protected 58.5 million acres of national forests.
It's been 20 years.
You know, this is land that belongs to you. It belongs to all of the citizens of the country. It truly is public land.
We should strengthen existing protections like the roadless rule.
Protect more habitats, watersheds, and recreational areas.
We need more nature. Years ago, organized.
All right. So that was a video that we made in celebration of the 20th anniversary of the roadless rule. And again, that was huge. It protected almost 60 million acres of roadless areas in our national forests, including old growth and mature trees. But it's been 20 years, and despite protections like the roadless rule, road building, industrial logging, and activities like mineral mining and oil trains threaten our remaining old growth forests and our future old growth forests, still at threat, destroying critical habitat for countless species and degrading land. And again, protections are spotty. So some of our older trees are protected from logging by wilderness designations, regional forest plans, being in a roadless area, being in a national park, but approximately 50 million acres of mature forests are not protected. Additionally, science, or our understanding of science, has evolved since 2001, making it clear that while the roadless rule was a huge step forward, it does not provide adequate protection to all of America's most valuable forests and trees, especially when it comes to their role in climate change. And we are focused on protecting our forests and trees in large part because of their role in climate change. We are in a climate crisis. We need every single tool available, and our trees and forests are some of the most effective natural climate solutions for absorbing and storing carbon. Additionally, carbon loss from timber harvests are 5 times higher than those from all other disturbances combined, including wildfire, because logging immediately releases decades of accumulated carbon back into the atmosphere. And only a fraction of carbon stored in wood products will go on to be stored in wood products. So we need to protect the trees that are absorbing and storing most of our carbon. So what is our campaign? It's been 20 years. We're looking at a climate crisis. We're looking at a biodiversity crisis. We don't have adequate protection. So what are we working to do here? We are working to protect and to get the federal government to protect more of our trees and forests. And this time, not just look at where they are on the map, but specifically look at how valuable they are when it comes to carbon sequestration. So I'm going to show another short video, this about the current campaign, the Climate Forest campaign that our groups have launched. And again, the Climate Forest campaign, which is a campaign and a coalition made up of over 100 groups across the country, our ultimate goal is to convince the Biden administration to enact a strong and durable rule that protects mature and old growth trees and forests on federal public lands from logging. And the goal of the rule is to halt the logging, prevent removal of large trees, and to shift management in order to, and management practices in order to promote carbon, absorbing carbon and storing carbon. So what's happened so far? We launched this campaign, the Climate Forest campaign, in February of 2022. On Earth Day, President Biden issued an executive order that directs federal agencies to conduct an inventory of mature and old growth forests on America's federal land so that policies can be adopted to protect them. This is a huge step forward for our efforts. The executive order is a direction. It directs the agencies to define, inventory, and develop policy. It's not a rule, it's not a law. We still need something durable. We need something durable that will protect these trees, but it's a really great start. And a couple of things that were particularly notable about the executive order. First is that it included the word mature forests. So acknowledging that it's not enough just to protect the old growth. We need to protect the future old growth. Second, it included Bureau of Land Management lands as well as National Forest Service lands. Most of the federal forest land is managed by the National Forest Service, but there is some that is managed by the Bureau of Land Management, particularly in the Pacific Northwest. And then finally, the executive order talks about old forests as a climate solution and in relation to climate change. That's also not something that we've seen before in any kind of policy and direction. So that executive order on Earth Day 2022 was a huge step forward for the campaign and really sends us in the right direction. In June of 2022, Secretary Vilsack, who is the Secretary of Agriculture, and the reason that the Department of Agriculture is involved is that the U.S. Forest Service is part of the Department of Agriculture because historically Forest Service land and trees were considered a crop, and so that's where it lives in that federal agency. Secretary Vilsack issued a secretarial memo, which acknowledged that America's forests capture more than 10% of our nation's carbon emissions each year. Also acknowledged that our forests give us clean water, provide for biodiversity, cultural resources, and outdoor recreation. But the secretarial memo also said that a primary threat to old growth stands on national forests is no longer timber harvesting. So that's a little bit of a step back when we know that we want to be protecting these trees and forests from logging. It's not great when the USDA and the Forest Service are saying that timber harvesting is not a major threat. So in July, to counter that and to raise awareness about the very real threat of logging, we released a report focusing on 10 case studies. In our report, which is called Worth More Standing, we highlighted 10 federal logging proposals targeting nearly 250,000 acres of old growth and mature forests across the country. And I'm going to actually put the link in the chat for anybody that's interested in reading through the full report later, but I'm going to quickly sort of take us on a little tour through these 10 projects. So there's the flat country timber sale in the Willamette National Forest in Oregon, which would aggressively log 2,000 acres of older forests in the Mackenzie River headwaters. Those provide fresh drinking water to hundreds of thousands of residents. And about 1,000 acres of mature and old growth Douglas fir and Western hemlock are part of this project. There's the Black Ram project in Montana, which is about 95,000 acres and would include logging nearly 1,800, clear cutting 1,800 acres and logging over 400 acres of mature and old growth forests. the Schwamigan-Nicolay National Forest, the 4 Mile project in Wisconsin, which would log about 12,000. The project is about 12,000 acres, and the data shows that more than half of those stands are 80 years old and older. We've got the Poor Windy project in also in Oregon, which would include more than 4,500 acres of mature and old growth trees that are essential for the northern spotted owl, as well as other species. The Buck project in North Carolina, which would be one of the largest timber sales in recent history in North Carolina, including 150 acres of trees, more than 100 years old, and 375 acres of mature forests. The Arizona project, the Burnt Coral Vegetation Management Project, includes clear cutting nearly 1,000 acres. The Telephone Gap project in Vermont is about 10,000 acres. 85% of those are likely to be mature. 55% are likely to be more than 100 years old. And then we've got the Klamath National Forest, the Bear Country project in Northern California, which includes over 4,000 acres of commercial logging, 3,700 of which is are unlogged stands, so they've not been logged before, over 2,000 acres of mature trees. And then the Black Hills project in Wyoming and South Dakota. So, and again, you can read through the report to learn a little bit more about those. I realize I I kind of breezed through each, and frankly, we could do a webinar about each one. But the point of showing those and the point of the report is to demonstrate that, you know, while certainly there are myriad threats to our forests, there is absolutely logging and timber projects that are being greenlit on both Bureau of Land Management and Forest Service land that will target and remove older and mature trees that we feel that it's so important that they stay standing. So what's next for our campaign? We've got a couple upcoming events upcoming events that we want to use to raise awareness. So the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP27, is coming up in November, and the United Nations Biodiversity Conference coming up in December. We want to use both of those as an opportunity to urge the Biden administration to take international leadership when it comes to tackling climate change and the biodiversity crisis by taking action to protect these older and mature trees. We're also working to fight back against bad legislation. So there's a bill, the Promoting Effective Forest Management Act of 2022, that unfortunately would actually encourage more logging of our mature trees rather than less. And then our coalition all across the country is organizing petitions, rallies, educational events, film screenings, and more. So I want to stop here and see what questions folks have and what I can answer, and then I'll turn it over to Jennifer to explain how that's all going to work.
Sure. Is this the end of your presentation, or do you just want to answer some questions right now and then kind of get back into it?
Yeah, so the last piece I had was actually just talking about what actions people can take. So
Okay.
I can answer questions and then kind
of. That sounds great. We do have a few questions in addition to the ones listed in the chat. So the first one is, what can be done to preserve old growth state forests and other wildlands under title to BLM and other federal agencies?
Sure. So I think you're asking, you know, there's obviously old growth and mature forests on state state land as well. It's not all managed by the federal government. So I'll say there's two reasons that we're focused on federal policy right now, and then I can answer this question a little bit. One is that the federal government, the Forest Service, manages the vast majority of mature, of public lands, public forest lands. And so, and then there's also while this is will be a challenging campaign and a heavy lift, if we win, obviously getting a single federal rule takes care of, literally millions and millions of acres at the same time. Whereas if, we go state by state, you're sort of picking away at smaller amounts. That said, especially in a state like, I don't know if the person asking the question is from California, but in a state like California, where the state actually, does manage, more land and more forest land than probably the average state, we can focus on actually pushing for the state government to adopt a similar policy. So if both the state forests, state government and the Bureau of Land Management are both tasked with protecting older and mature trees and forests in order to protect them for climate change purposes, then we should be in a situation where those overlapping policies actually mean that those mature stands are not open to logging through any BLM sale and not open to logging through any state sale. So I think the next step, or maybe even kind of a concurrent step, is running state level campaigns to get state agencies to adopt a similar rule.
Great. This is a small group, so I was just that question came from Stuart, if he had anything else to add or to expand on that question.
I was just, thank you. Thank you very much for the webinar as well. I feel that some of the fire safe mitigation or preventive prescribed burns and such are a technique that are underused in many of the old growth forests. And with the risk of wildfire increasing in the West primarily, we have enormous volumes of old growth and mature forest that are at risk. And I have a second question, which I know I've already added to the chat, about prescribed burns, and I'd like you to talk to that.
Sure.
issue.
Yeah, so does forest management include prescribed burning? Absolutely. And I think so. Some folks may be familiar with this, but the Forest Service, is sort of still recovering from decades and decades of fire policy that basically amounted to, we have to put out every fire as soon as it starts. Very focused on fire prevention. Now, fire is natural in forests and in the backcountry. It's it's part of a healthy the healthy cycle of the lifetime of a forest. Forests in the backcountry survive fires, trees survive, it clears out space and allows new trees and more vegetation to build up. There are species that live and thrive in in dead trees and in burned out trees. And so one of the challenges that we have is that for years and years and years there were not only no prescribed burns, but we were actually putting out fires that probably should have been left to burn. Obviously this is a complicated topic. There are communities that have been absolutely devastated by wildfires, and it is really important that the Forest Service and the federal and state agencies have the resources that they need to protect communities from wildfires. But prescribed burns and wildfires in the backcountry, again, it needs to be done carefully. It needs to be done, looking at the, at the best available science. And as I'm not, I'm not an expert. I would not be one of the people out in the backcountry saying this is exactly how we should do this. But there are folks that know. There's also a pretty extensive body of indigenous forest management practices, which included prescribed burning. So, again, I think it's tricky. It's very important to preserve communities, but it's absolutely a tool in the toolbox, and it's important that that the federal agencies be able to use it and use it well. Okay, so that's a little bit there.
Thank you. Another question, what do you think of logging burned forests?
Right. So that's a good question. It is, it's not necessary, as far as, as I understand, and I've seen, there's science that shows, logging the burned forest will not do much to prevent future fires. And again, the dead standing trees, the dead down trees, the burned trees those are actually critical for a lot of wildlife in kind of the natural cycle of the forest. So I think we again, each forest and each logging project is going to be a case by case type of thing. So I can't answer, no, you must never ever take a log out of a burned forest. There may well be cases where that's where that's based on the best available science. But it's, there's a lot of science that shows that burned forests and forests recovering from fires actually they really do just fine without us going in and and logging and removing trees.
And then next question, what do you think of Chad Hansen's book Smokescreen: Debunking Wildfire Myths to Save Our Forests and Climate?
I have actually not read that Chad Hansen's book. It's on my list of books to read, so I can't specifically comment to that. It looks like Maria had a second half of the question. How do we cover our needs for wood products? That's a good one. And we get asked that a lot. So one is that I'll say for this particular effort that Environment America and other groups are working on, we are really just focused on federal forest land. And the US timber industry only does it's less than 5% of their activity happens on federal forest land. So we wouldn't be looking at a really huge hit to the US timber industry. Again, less than 5% of their activity. Most of the rest of it is happening on private forest land. But there are options. We're in sort of a consumer demand supply, chicken or egg conundrum. But there are certainly options for recycled and repurposed wood. This isn't available at scale in most places, unfortunately. But if you think about, this is something I think about, and it stresses me out, the amount of wood that is probably sitting in landfills, or otherwise disposed of, that could likely be repurposed, whether it's from old barns or old buildings or other old construction. So there's that. There is, there are actually alternative materials. So, sustainably grown bamboo, obviously that's not going to solve all of your structural needs, but whether it's bamboo countertops, flooring, coffee tables, that sort of thing, those are certainly options. There's a set of alternatives that way. And then, is there such a thing as sustainable logging? I think we can protect our old growth and future old growth, and still, still log and still use wood products. I don't think we need to be in a world where there's literally no logging and no wood products. Obviously, wood is, for a set of uses better than alternatives. So I think there are various third-party certifications, including the Forest Stewardship Council. So if you're looking for, wood or wood products that are sustainable, you can look for those labels or stickers to find wood that's been grown more sustainably than not.
Okay, and then I have one more question. Any insights on how massive wildfires affect carbon in the air compared to like full tree removal for wood products, timber logging?
Yeah, so there's a science and folks have run the numbers that shows that logging actually releases the sort of industrial logging releases more CO2 than wildfires do, and that's I'd have to dig that up to see exactly what the numbers are, but logging, sort of the whole process of doing that is actually more problematic from carbon emission standpoint than fires. And that's not to discount that fires are, do cause air pollution and carbon pollution.
Does anyone have any other questions to add to the chat? And do that now. I think that's it. And so did you want to speak about how to get involved?
Yeah, I can move on to the next next slide here. So yeah, there's a number of ways that that we're looking for folks to get involved. Signing petitions, in participating in public comment periods. We one of the kind of great things about this process following the President Biden's executive order is that the federal government and the agencies have already held one public comment period. They're likely to hold more. So they are, there'll be a lot of opportunities for public input. You can contact the White House and other elected officials outside of public comment periods as well. Let them know that you want them to take, quick action to protect old growth and mature trees and forests. We're always looking for folks to write letters to the editor. This is, one of the best ways to educate other members of the newspaper reading public. As well, we know that elected officials and decision makers read the opinion sections. We'd love to have folks post on social media. Our hashtag is #ClimateForests. And, we've got a lot of groups and folks posting on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, whatever the platform of your choice. And then obviously, tell your friends, tell your family, spread the word about the importance of protecting our forests. And then I've put in under this slide, and I'll also put them into the chat, both my email address. So if anyone is interested in more information, you've got a follow-up question, want to get more involved, and then also the Climate Forests website, which has a lot more information about our campaign and all of the work that we've been doing, and a lot of resources with some more information about some of the things that I've talked about. So I can stop sharing my screen, and then I'm happy to answer any other questions that folks may have that may have come to mind.
Yes, it's so, since this is such a small group, you could probably just unmute yourself if you have anything else you'd like to pose to Len.
I guess I'll say something. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So throughout your presentation, I've just been grappling with this notion of like public safety versus like ecological benefits. And like, I keep going back and forth because I'm kind of more on like the public safety sphere of things. And so I'm wondering like, what is your group doing to like kind of balance those two issues? Especially because like I'm in Tahoe and I'm hearing all the time like, oh, we need to remove, we need to get rid of a lot of trees. And then, but in doing so, we're like keeping some, like a lot of our older growth trees, and removing a lot of our younger trees. And I feel like that's leaving like an unhealthy balance as well in our forest. So do you have any insight into like this like public safety versus ecological benefit perspective?
Yes, and I assume you mean public safety specifically on the fire.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So I mean, this, it should be the case that we can do both at the same time. Leaving old growth or older stands in the backcountry alone, we should be able to do that and also do everything that's necessary in the area right around communities. So that's sometimes referred to as the wildland urban interface, or sometimes people call it the WUI, which is just how you would pronounce WUI. And our coalition is not advocating for changing anything that happens in the wildland urban interface. We wouldn't be advocating for, like, if there's a tree that's likely to fall on a fire or, a power line, for example, that'd be a good example of something that probably for public safety should be removed. We're really more focused on the bigger older trees that are mostly in the backcountry, that are, not the ones that catch fire quickly. They tend to be more resilient. So we really should be able to tackle both things at the same time. They ought to actually be complementary rather than something that has to be balanced out, when it comes to the science and the actual, actual implementation. And then again, because we're just focused on those, those older trees, I think the removal of younger trees is a category where there's probably, you can get as many opinions as there are people in the room about which younger trees shouldn't be removed. But our campaign wouldn't have a particular position on that, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answered.
No, yeah, that completely answered it. I might have missed I don't know if you made the comment earlier about the WUI, but just that comment alone makes a lot of sense. Now it's all in perspective. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's not very many old growth trees in the WUI. That doesn't mean that there's none, but that's not really the what we're talking about. Then it looks like William has a hand up.
Yeah, hi. I'm working with Sierra Club and on a number of forestry issues. Two issues, as one is after a fire comes through, you create a lot of dead snags, which there are some studies that suggest we should leave those alone because they reduce the wind speed, which would drive burning embers. But the main question I had is, are there studies? Are you moving in the direction of promoting old growth and mature forests because of their water sequestration and the micro transpiration and the microclimate that they create because of their water sequestration capabilities, as opposed to carbon sequestration.
I mean, the beautiful thing about old growth forests is that it's a kind of a yes and. You know, they are incredibly important for water. They're incredibly important for climate resilience. They're incredibly important for carbon sequestration. They're incredibly important for wildlife. The reason that we have been focused on climate in this campaign is mostly because we, you know, we know that the Biden administration wants to take action on climate, and we think that, you know, sort of talking to them, you know, about how trees are a climate, you know, trees and forests are a climate solution might be kind of the most, you know, the most effective way, you know. And as I said, we're, you know, sort of wanting to tie to, you know, UN climate talks. We know they're thinking about it as climate, but that doesn't discount the, you know, incredible co-benefits of, you know, of old growth forests when it comes to, you know, to water, you know, water filtration and, you know, groundwater health, as well as, you know, as well as habitat. So we should protect them for all of those reasons, and, you know, protect the features that help with all of those things. And I'll say Sierra Club is part of this, the climate forest effort. And you guys are excellent, excellent to work with. So always great to meet another Sierra Club person.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Looks like that is the end of the questions for Len. So Len, I really would like to thank you so much for this very relevant presentation, and to everyone online for joining us today. So I encourage all of you to reach out to Len to get involved and learn more. And I'd like to invite you to contribute to the Sierra Nevada Alliance to help keep these monthly webinars free and accessible to all. So you can visit our website at sierranevadaalliance.org/donate, or text WILD SNA to 530-456-4967. And then I also encourage you to visit our website to learn more about what the Alliance does. And we have a recording of this webinar, and it will be available shortly after on our website, and it will also be emailed to you with a short survey to evaluate the webinar. And be on the lookout for our future webinars. We have one coming up on October 10th, Mushrooms of the Sierra, which has actually been a really popular topic. So we'll have Gina Woods of Woods Apothecary out of South Lake Tahoe chatting with us on October 10th. So I hope we will see you online then. Thank you so much. Have a great.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Len.